Hello, everyone, and welcome to Get Hired Live. I'm Andrew Seaman, the LinkedIn news editor for job searches and careers. I'm here to welcome you, as always, and I want to have you introduce yourself into the comments. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us what you're doing in terms of your job search, where you're looking, what you want to do next in your job search. And then what I want you to do is watch what other people are saying and then connect with them. Maybe you find someone who is looking for work in your industry, who's looking for work in the industry you want to move to, and make connections. Networking is so vitally important to a job search, and there's no better time to start than now. So be sure that you're connecting with each other, and then maybe you could help each other job search. That's some of the best messages I get after the show is from people who end up connecting and doing a job search together. We have so many people joining the stream already. I see that we already have Diana from Colorado, Andrew from Spain, not this Andrew, I'm obviously not in Spain, I'm in New York, Elizabeth from Boston, Donna from Toronto, and Trisha from Pennsylvania, my home state. So welcome all. I think I also saw people joining us. Ignacio from Buenos Aires, Kishle from India. So welcome to all of you. I hope you'll find this very useful, and I think you will because we have a great guest today. So we have joining us Chelsea J, and she is an advocate for building a career with purpose. She's also a resume writer and career coach. So welcome, Chelsea.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, no, thank you for joining us. And, you know, one of the things that we were talking about a little bit before the show is the digital presence of job seekers. So, you know, job seekers and everyone leave a trail online. Mm-hmm. And obviously, when people apply to a company, the company will likely Google them, look them up on LinkedIn. So what is the importance of that digital presence?
Yes, that's an awesome question, and actually one of my favorite topics to talk about. So let's kind of backtrack really quick and talk about what a digital presence is and what it means. So some people refer to it as a digital footprint, and others refer to it, well, I do, as a digital tattoo, because either you are going to love it or regret it down the road. So your online presence means anything that an employer can find out about you whenever they type your name into Google. So I always say you do not have to be a celebrity to Google yourself. So anyone that I work with, the first thing that I do is go into Google, type in their name, because I want to see who I'm working with. And I also want to see what employers are looking at too, whenever they Google your name. So I strongly recommend going on to Google, checking out your name every 3 to 6 months, just so you can see what other people are seeing. And if you think, Chelsea, I'm not going to do that every 3 to 6 months, let me give you a tip. At least go to Google. You can go to google.com/alerts, type your name in. You have to have a Gmail account, but type your name in, click enter, and you will get an alert every time something new comes up about your name.
Definitely. And I have one of those alerts for myself because I'm a vain person and I just like to see what people are talking about me. I have one of those. But for people out there who maybe want to curate their digital presence, so what should they do as job seekers to position themselves for a great job? Because, you know, from my research, there's companies that actually do the digging for some employers to find out what people are posting online. So how should people curate their presence? But then also maybe they have some unsavory pictures from college of, you know, maybe parties or things like that. How do people sort of clean up their presence too?
Yes, definitely. So great questions. So first of all, once you figure out what's on that first and second page of Google, you'll want to see whether you're proud of it, whether it really represents your brand and who you are. What I will say is a survey that happened about a couple years ago from Career Builder, they did find that 70% of employers are going online to Google candidates. So the first thing that you want to make sure is you are fully representing who you are in a positive light. So always click on the images, and if you see images that are unsavory or not the best and don't present you in the best light, try to find the source. Reach out to that source, because it could be a Facebook friend that tagged you in a photo. Reach out to them, ask them if they can take it down and not tag you in that. One of the other things that I learned from my marketing coach is for every one negative thing, you need to have 5 positives. So what I strongly recommend is making sure you're being mindful whenever you're commenting on different posts online. Make sure that you're really mindful about the content that you're putting on there, and make sure that you're mindful about the photos that you're posting, because that's exactly what employers are looking for. A great platform is LinkedIn. Make sure that your LinkedIn profile is built out, and make sure that it is stellar and represents who you are and what you do. Make sure that you follow companies that are in your field and that you're interested in, and make sure when you're commenting, your comments add value, because employers will see that. So just always be mindful about your activity online.
Yes, and then we actually have Christopher, who says he does alerts. They work really well. And Takista says that that's great advice. Employers do search to learn more about potential employees. So I think that's all fantastic. And what's nice, I think, too, is when you search, a lot of times your LinkedIn ends up being the first thing that people see. So having that curated nicely can, even if you have maybe some other things that are popping up lower, might help you if you have like a really good profile. And then, like you said, having those things that outweigh anything negative. So I think that's fantastic. Thank you. And we have people joining the stream still from all over. We have Kim from Dallas, Thomas from Michigan, Ginger from Nebraska, Steven from California. So if you're out there and you have questions about job searching, be sure to get them into the comments. We're going to be answering them now. And I wanted to start with one from Katie. And Katie sent me a message just talking about, what should job seekers do if they're running out of savings and they need to get back into the workforce and they're just not having any luck? And in some cases, I think there are people who have been out of work for maybe 7-8 months at this point because of the pandemic. So people who are sort of at that difficult point in their job search, what do you think they should do?
Well, there's actually a couple different things that you can do. And I get that this process can be draining. It can be extremely discouraging, and you start to feel like you're spinning your wheels. So if you are starting to run low on your savings, I suggest prioritizing those savings. So first of all, get help. You do not have to go through this alone. There are a lot of professionals out there that can help you with this job search, because you might be making just a little minor mistake that can change your results drastically. So if you can afford it, I strongly suggest getting help. Another thing that I highly recommend is leaning heavy on your network. I know sometimes when job seekers are unemployed, it can feel embarrassing and you just kind of want to go in a corner and not tell anyone. But if you're not telling your network, they can't help. And I guarantee you, if you have a strong network, they are going to want to help you. So reach out to your network and get your name out there to them so they can be on the lookout for you as well.
Yes, and in fact, I just saw data that we published from LinkedIn. LinkedIn has like an open to work feature, and the latest data shows that people who activated actually ended up getting more outreach from recruiters and just outreach in general. So I was really encouraged by that, because there was some debate among job search experts whether that would actually be helpful or not. So it's nice to see the data suggesting that actually doing that helps. Like you said, people can't help you if you don't ask for it. Yeah, and we have actually a follow-up to the digital presence conversation from Lydia, and she wants to know what to do if she doesn't have a digital presence at all.
Okay, I love that question, and I'm really glad that you asked that, because in the same Career Builder study, it showed that 47% of employers actually skipped over candidates who they couldn't find online and didn't have an online presence. So the number one thing that I suggest is optimizing your LinkedIn profile. And remember to check your settings, because sometimes in the settings, I know that some job seekers say, hey, when I'm typed into a search engine, I don't want to be found. Change that to public. So that will kind of boost your name in the system. I've also worked with clients before where we bought a domain name for them, and they actually started pushing out content, kind of like a personal blog and portfolio, and that has helped with establishing a presence online as well.
That's really great advice, because I know, even, when I talk to a lot of people, and often I talk to young journalists who are coming up in the field, and I always tell them, write about what you want to cover in the future, or write about what you're passionate about. And then when people are looking at you, even for internships or whatever, when they Google you, they say, oh, they're reading this, they're citing this. And it gives them a great example of what you pay attention to, what you know. So that's fantastic advice. And we have a question here from, and I'm sorry, I lost the name, but I think you might be able to help, because you're an expert on sort of being a career changer. And basically, he asked that he has 4 months left in the military and wants to know when he should start applying for jobs outside the military. And I know this is something that, people face when they when they do serve. So when people need to make that transition and they need to go into private industry, what's your advice for him?
I say as soon as possible. Get all of your career documents in order. So make sure you have your resume, make sure you have a cover letter and your LinkedIn profile built out and optimized. You want to do that as soon as possible, because the average job seeker takes anywhere from 3 to 6 months to land a role. I've worked with professionals in the military before, and I've always made sure to cover that in their cover letter so that they know, hey, I'm available on this date. This is when I'm coming back and I can work. Employers are usually understanding, and the amount of time that the hiring process takes, it usually ends up landing perfectly. So go ahead as soon as possible.
Yeah, and I bet a lot of employers, especially if you are in the military, they may wait those 4 months, even if they want someone to start now, because people who come out of the military, they have so much experience and so many skills that it might be worth the wait for them to say, okay, well, we'll hold on 2 months or so. Exactly. So that's great. And then we have a question here from Nick, and this is also sort of about career changes. And he says, any tips for breaking into a space with no on-paper experience? This is obviously probably a little bit difficult if you say, I don't have any experience, but what should people do if they do want to move to a place and they just don't think they have transferable skills, or they don't?
Yeah, great question. Another great question. So I deal with this a lot, and this is when we start setting up goals and timelines. So you want to break into a new field that you're not really familiar with. So my question is always, okay, so how can you get that experience so that we can showcase that on your resume to an employer? And what is your time frame? So if you say, hey, a year from now, I want to dive into this new field, I say, okay, great. Let's put a plan together on how you can get that experience. Are there additional classes that you can take? Is there an internship that you can take? Can you volunteer somewhere to get those additional skills? And if you can do any of those 3 things, that's when we can start to build your portfolio. And that way you can be more confident in that new skill. And when you go to that interview, you can sell yourself even better by saying, hey, I'm a go-getter and I took the initiative to learn this new skill when I didn't have it. And then tell your story. Demonstrate your why. Why do you want to go into that field? Because now you're connecting your experience with the story, and that's a bonus for employers.
Yes, and I think a lot of people, they don't value volunteer experience enough, because, volunteer experience is still experience, and it gives you that ability to just sort of keep your skills flexing. Even if you're out of work, I think it's always a great place to say, hey, I got to keep my skills up to date by volunteering and doing bookkeeping for this nonprofit or something like that. It shows that you at least did something during that time. So I think that's fantastic. And we have a question here from Christina, and this is something that actually a few people have asked me over the past week, which is how do you keep from being told you're overqualified for positions that maybe be a rank 1 or 2 below where you could be? So a lot of people, they may want to take a step back just to have some more free time. Maybe they don't want to work full force. So what should a person do to prevent being told they're overqualified or just being overlooked because of it?
All right, so I'm going to give you a suggestion, and then I'll give you a personal example as well. So the first thing is, what's your why? If you know you're overqualified, why are you applying to this specific position? You have to think about that. And that's what you have to demonstrate to employers. So what I always want you to do is be able to answer that question first, because that's what they're going to ask. And you can highlight that in a cover letter. So as a personal example, I used to be an executive director, and then I took a step down and kind of changed my career and went into more of an employee role. And whenever I sent out my resume, employers said, "You were an executive director. Why do you want to be an employee now?" My why was because I no longer wanted that responsibility. I was going back to school and I couldn't manage a large staff. So I found that since I humanized it, employers understood and they were able to, take that risk and take that chance with me. So remember what your why is, tell your story, and remember to display it right away. And a good cover letter can do that for you.
And we have a question here from Mick, and I think this goes in the same sort of category as overqualified, okay, which is ageism. So a lot of people, I think, when they confront ageism, they're told, you might be overqualified for this role or something along those lines. And he wants to know how you combat ageism. And unfortunately, it's a very real thing. We have data to show that is a real thing. So how can a person at least minimize the impact of it?
Definitely. So what I strongly recommend, especially on your resume, is removing anything from the 90s. Anytime I see 90s, I'm like, no, we're taking that off right now. So on your resume, make sure that you're only going back either 10 to 15 years so that it doesn't date you that way. And again, this is another area where you want to reach out on your network to the people who know you and who trust you and can vouch for you and get you in the doors without experiencing the ageism.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of times what I always tell people is mindset is so important too, is that, people, they just, they worry about it so much. It sort of comes across in interviews or it may project in some way. So I think, mindset is so important when it comes to sort of worrying about ageism or anything that maybe you're worried about. It's sort of having that confidence. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum, we have people who are just entering the job market or they're career starters. And we have a question here from Courtney who says, as a recent graduate, I'm finding that employers are wanting more experience. How can I market myself to get my foot in the door? And I think the classic example of this is sort of an entry-level job that requires 3 to 5 years of experience. So what would your advice be for Courtney?
Definitely. So first of all, a job description is an employer's wish list. They understand that if you just graduated, you are not going to have 3 to 5 years of experience. But what I do want you to focus on is using your experience from college. What activities were you involved in? Where did you volunteer? What extra projects did you take on? Did you do freelance on the side? What are your hobbies? Really focus on that, because that makes you a well-rounded person and it's showing I have experience here and I have the initiative to do what it takes to learn this job and get it done. I also highly recommend, forming relationships with people who are at the company who will end up being in your network and can vouch for you as well. So again, network is really key, especially in this market today.
Yes, and we also have, switching gears, have some questions here about LinkedIn profiles. We talked about it a little bit earlier, and we have a question here from Sean, which is, what are the most important things to include in your LinkedIn profile? I think a lot of people, maybe they're starting their profile and they have that blank space. What should they fill it with?
All right, so there's actually a few things, but my number one tip is focus. Make sure that you are focused with your message. I see a lot of profiles that list a million different jobs just in the headline alone. I want you to have a powerful headline, a powerful branding statement. I want you to think about what it is that you do. Like, what's your superpower? What do you offer to employers? What changes do you make? Put that in your headline. Also, make sure that you have your picture and make sure that you're utilizing your summary section that has a clear focus about what you do, what your experience is in, and what you're looking for.
And we have a question here, I think, that is something that could apply to resumes, cover letters, and LinkedIn profiles, which is career gaps, and it's from Edward. For maybe people who've been out of the workforce for a year or two, and for one reason or another, they have to get back in. What should people do about career gaps on their profiles and their other marketing materials?
Definitely. So first of all, I strongly recommend, if you are out of work, I want you to stay active doing something. So again, we go back to volunteering, freelancing, taking up new hobbies, learning new skills, going back to school, whatever it is that you use to fill that time with, you can talk about that. Let people know that, you went through different changes and you weren't just not doing anything. So that's always a strong recommendation. Also, I suggest facing it head on. If you really were out of work and didn't have a chance to do any type of professional development for yourself, bring that up. Let them know, hey, I know I've been out of work. This, was an issue. You don't have to tell them what happened, but start to draw upon your past experience and what your goals are for the future. So again, storytelling is key. Connecting with the human reader who's actually looking over it will get you farther.
And I guess in that case, we have questions here about cover letters.
Mm-hmm.
Are you pro cover letter?
I am very pro cover letter. And if you work with me, you are 100% going to have a cover letter. Your cover letter is your opportunity for you to shine and share who you are. And it's not as boring as the resume could be. Like, I want your personality to come through so that you're connecting with the reader. So cover letters are still very relevant and they can set you apart.
Yeah, and I think that's true for any piece of writing, because you're going to get people who are so formulaic about it that says, please see my attached resume for the position of, senior accountant at blah, blah, blah. I look forward to hearing from you. But when a recruiter, and I think anyone would see something that's maybe 2 paragraphs long with a little bit more detail, a little bit about vision and experience, I think it just resonates with any human a little bit more.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I guess, while we're on the subject of cover letters, what's your advice for cover letters, in terms of length and content? What should people really hit a recruiter or hiring manager with in them?
Definitely. So first of all, we're not getting into 2 or 3 pages. Don't make it too long. Just capture the reader's attention. Introduce yourself. Say something unique about you that nobody else would really know, but is relevant to the job. If you have a nickname for doing an amazing job in a certain field, lead with that. And do your research on the company and figure out what type of employees they're looking for and what they value and what their mission and vision statement is, and talk about how you're personally tied to that. And take a look at the job description on what results they're looking for. Just give a few snapshots on what you've done in the past and how you can do that for them. So really make it all about the employer and how you want to make their life easier.
Yes, and I think that's so important, because so many job seekers, I think, get into the habit of, and I know I fall into this trap a little bit too, is when you get so much experience, you sort of say, well, who wouldn't want me? And really the key is making that pitch of, here's what I can do for you with that experience. So I think that sort of making it about them is so important. And yeah, and I think obviously after the cover letter, one of the next steps is interviews, and we have a lot of questions about that.
Okay.
And one of them is from Laura, which is, do you have any tips on closing within the interview process? I've had 2 opportunities go down to the final candidates and didn't get the role. Looking to get the edge next time.
Okay, sounds good. So there's actually a few things. Number 1, when an employer says, do you have any questions for us? Your answer should always be yes. Never walk out that room with not having any questions answered. I think one of the most important questions is asking about their process and what it looks like. And also asking them, hey, do you have any additional questions for me that I may not have covered? And what type of person are you looking for to fill this role? That's actually one of my favorite questions, because if the employer absolutely loves you, they'll start saying you and when you're here, and they'll kind of start alluding to that. And you'll be able to see where their mind frame is at. So if they start repeating things that you said in the interview, that's a good sign right there. So those are a few of the tips that I have. I would also recommend wrapping up with telling them that you really want to work there and you really want to be a part of their team. I think a lot of job seekers forget to do that.
Yes, they do. In fact, when I help friends who are in the job search process, they'll say, hey, can you look at my cover letter? Can you look at this? And I'll look at it and I'll say, nowhere in this does it say you actually want to work there. So I said, if you don't tell them that, why would they think that? So if you're not excited, they won't get excited about you.
Exactly.
Yeah. And we have some other questions here. And I think one of them is, which is from Denise, can you follow up after rejection email asking why you weren't selected. And I think maybe some people, they often fall in love with jobs, or they feel a connection with people after an interview. So after you get that rejection email or letter, can you follow up, and what should you do?
Yes. Always, always, always follow up, because at the end of the day, you don't know what happened. Sometimes they could have hired internally. Sometimes they could have closed the position. You never know what it was. So don't always take it personal, because it's not always personal. So yes, after you get that rejection email, I always recommend reaching out to the hiring manager that you had direct contact with, and just say, hey, I saw I got the rejection. I'm bummed. I was really looking forward to working with you guys. Do you have any suggestions for any areas that I can improve in interviewing going forward, and better ways that I can convey that I really want to work for you and with you? So I highly recommend doing that for sure. Sorry about that, my big dog in the background, but that's life of working from home. But always ask. And sometimes I've seen employers come back and they say, hey, I really, really did love you, but we closed the position, or we went internally. And then that's your opportunity to say, okay, great, keep me in mind for future opportunities. And I've had clients land roles that way in the future.
Yes, and no worries about the dog. I just had a street sweeper go by. So it's one of those, like you said, one of the joys of working from home.
Exactly.
And something else that comes up, especially maybe in those rejection emails, is ghosting. Where you won't hear anything back. And we have questions here, which is from Melanie and Lakshma, which is, why do recruiters ghost? And this could happen, obviously, several places in the hiring process, but why does it happen?
There's a million reasons for it. And just for the recruiters in their defense, they are overwhelmed and overworked half the time, and they are just trying to keep up with all the demands of the employer. So it's not always intentional. Sometimes it's just by accident. They get wrapped up in a million different things, and they have hundreds of people that they're trying to recruit. So don't take it personally. As far as the employer ghosting you, I know that can be really frustrating, especially after you've put your time and energy into going into an interview. It happens, and sometimes I like to say that it's a blessing in disguise, because do you really want to work for an employer who ghosts you? So it probably happened for a reason.
Yes, and I think one of the best pieces of advice that I've heard too about ghosting is just always be nice, because in my case, when I was interviewing with LinkedIn, I didn't hear anything for like a month, and it turns out the recruiter got busy, that the hiring manager was away, things happen, and here I am. So you have to sometimes give them a little bit of space, because you don't know what's happening in the company, and they may not be able to give you an update immediately. So just always, even though you might be angry or upset, to just always be courteous. I think that's one of the biggest tips.
I agree, definitely. Don't burn bridges ever.
Yes, you may need to go across them, so don't do that. And we have a bunch of questions coming in, again, about one of your specialties, which is career pivots and changing careers. Cynthia says, I'm switching careers from a classroom teacher to instructional design, which is actually a really cool move.
It is.
Yeah. What advice do you have for career switchers, especially if you've been in your first career for over 20 years?
Definitely. So you're switching for a reason. If you want to be an instructional designer, I'm guessing it's because that you saw something that you didn't like while you were a teacher, and you just want to improve it. So that's your story, and that's your why. And I know I say that all the time, but your why is what is going to get you into the door. So make sure that you're using that previous experience and saying, hey, I've worked on this side. I want to jump over to this side for this reason. I want to be able to make these improvements. I want to be able to impact this specific group. That is what I would strongly suggest. So know your why and tell your story.
And we have two questions here, which is from Sean and Tina. And basically, they want to know how you highlight cross-industry skills, or how do you break into an industry when you have sort of standard applicable skills? How do you do that on a resume or marketing materials?
Right. So most of the time, whenever you're switching fields, you usually have similarities anyway. The lingo is just different. So make sure that you're researching your new industry and find ways that, you can show, hey, I did that here in this role. So I can easily do that in your role. I just used a different piece of software or used a different method to get it done. So a lot of the time it boils down to lingo and different phrases. So make sure that you're doing your research so that you know how your new industry talks.
And we also have a question here, and this sometimes trips people up with their resume and their profile, or at least they think it trips them up, which is, this one's from Robin. How do you get past your resume being overlooked because you do not have a bachelor's college degree, but are fully qualified based on professional work experience?
Definitely. So that's where, again, some research comes in, because is a bachelor's degree required? Like, is that a hard requirement for that industry, for that specific role? If it's not, you need to find a way to actually get in front of the manager and have a direct conversation with them, so that they can see your resume. And the tough thing about that is your resume isn't going to pass if it looks like everybody else's. So your standard 2-3 pages that really don't showcase your value outside of your education, you need to kind of have that redone and be able to get in front of the hiring manager. So I would strongly suggest kind of building relationships, get people who can vouch for you, and get in front of people to let them know, I have this experience. What is the qualifications that you need from me?
Yeah, and I think, getting in front of the hiring manager and doing that through networking is always sort of a good idea, whether you have a college degree or not. So
Exactly.
I always shoot high about networking, I think. And before we go, I was hoping, what would be your biggest piece of advice for people who are job searching right now? Because, obviously there was new job numbers in the US today that, the job recovery is slowing a little bit. So what would you suggest, people getting off this show, what should they do next, do you think?
Definitely. So I think that you need to identify your unique value and tell your story behind that, because you're unique. You have a unique set of experience and perspectives and skills that you can bring to an employer. So just make sure that you know what that is and know what you can offer, and make sure that you're able to explain that to employers and share that. And that will kind of give you a step above the rest, being able to tell your story and share what you bring.
Yes, own your story is so important. And thank you so much for joining us. It was great having you, and you answered so many questions from our members. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I hope everyone was watching at the bottom of your screen. We had Chelsea's LinkedIn profile at the bottom, so be sure to follow her. She publishes a ton of great posts, so do that. I think it's on the bottom of your screen right now. And also stay tuned, because we have coming up every day at noon a show, whether it's LinkedIn News Live or Get Hired Live. First, we have next week, Get Hired Live on Friday. We'll have Elisa Cohn, who is a global CEO coach. That's October 9th at noon. So please join us then. We'll be answering a ton of questions. We'll be talking about job searching in the fall. And then you don't have to wait for more information before then, because every day at noon we also have LinkedIn News Today, which is LinkedIn News Live, which is a great news show every day at noon, except on Fridays. And on Monday they have Marco Zappacosta, who is the CEO of Thumbtack. So you can ask him a bunch of questions, and he knows a lot about the job space as well. And as I always say, please stay well, stay safe, listen to your local health officials, because you can't be a good candidate, you can't get hired unless you're in good health. So be sure to do that. And until next time, be well, stay safe, and I'll see you then.